A nice cup of tea. The reactions in my social media timeline have basically been a mixture of panic, bafflement, rage, hysteria, and gloating. But there's nothing a sit down and a nice cup of tea can't hurt. Things are not as bad as some people are painting. This does not mean this whole Brexit thing is good, but there are opportunities, ways of ameliorating the harm, and there's even a potential way to make it through. But first, a nice cup of tea. Made with boiling water, that's boiling, not recently boiled, or, California, not merely hot. Boiling water breaks open the flavour of the tea leaves in the bag. Get that right, and the world is yours. Onwards. Alright, how did we get here? Well, resentment towards Europe has been a staple of Britain. We've been at war with it in some form or other for most of the last 1,000 years, mostly with the French. The European Union was therefore a useful way to extend our influence, stop the French and Germans from getting too friendly, getting in bed with each other too much, and, be part of something bigger. But, too bigger, and much of Britain started to get nervous. A free movement of people within the EU was mostly okay for most people until the Eastern European countries joined the EU. And suddenly Britain had a whole lot of Polish builders, which is a boon to the building trade and the economy, as well as the Polish economy, who got a lot of currency sent back home. Things seem to work okay-ish. But in these and in other jobs, wage levels started to get flattened because of increasing Eastern European labour. Public services, such as hospitals and schools, were stretched further. And the government, didn't increase them or anything, even as they benefited from those increased tax revenues. Britain saw more accents and languages added to its population. Not everyone liked that. Previous increases had been introduced more moderately and was tolerated and then accepted by most Brits. Eastern European migration happened a little more suddenly. All this fueled a kind of anti-Europeanism that was seized upon by a number of nascent political parties, but especially UKIP. The United Kingdom Independence Party, which actually started as a left-wing party, but then soon swung right as new people took it over. But they did still manage to maintain a left-wing appeal. And in repeated elections, they called for a referendum over membership of the EU. Now, UKIP did well, increasingly well, but got little representation in Parliament thanks to Britain's archaic political representative system. Nevertheless, it was enough of a threat for enough members of the Conservative Party, the leading party in the recent coalition government, to make David Cameron make a manifesto pledge for a European Union referendum at the last general election, in order to stop people feeling they had to join UKIP. Well, then the Conservative Party won an overall majority rather than the expected minority forming government, and as a result they then felt duty-bound to hold that referendum that they promised, or be labelled liars at the next election. So why did Britain vote Brexit? Well, I mentioned a few things. It's been easy to dismiss the vote as some kind of racist, xenophobic tribal war, but if that were the case, I don't think the vote would have commanded the support it did. Instead, there are plenty of political ideologues wedded to the idea of a more direct democracy, who were opposed to EU corruption, who saw the EU as an economic bureaucratic cartel. And frankly, it's hard to argue with that. Britain's membership of the EU has generally been a pragmatic one, finding an advantage to be part of such an economic cartel, paying the cost of being a member, but reaping certain rewards in terms of economic success. However, how much of that actually trickles down to the man of the street? Well, that's debatable. For many, the EU was the distant man, keeping them down, although occasionally providing their employers a grant for this and that. Much of the vote had little to do with immigration, but was probably revenge against the bankers, the politicians, the economists who had colluded together and caused, or at least not prevented, the financial crash that gave great hardship. It also helped that this referendum saw everyone's vote count equally, rather than with the usual British general election being wasted depending where in the country and in what demographic it was cast. And people who never voted through apathy or frustration came out to vote this time with a far, far higher turnout than you'd expect in general elections. And yeah, they weren't happy. This ended up being as much as a left-wing vote against the machinations of big business as it was a right-wing vote against the nasty foreigner. Though, there was some of that as well. So why the disparity? Because, Scotland, Northern Ireland and London swung to remain. The rest of the country went mostly to leave. Now, Northern Ireland and Scotland have been economically deprived and do benefit hugely from EU membership. But then, that's the same with Wales and Cornwall, who definitely went for leave. I mean, that specific dissonance will be debated by political scientists for decades. But London has more people tapped in, I guess, to the higher echelons of the economy, as well as a rich and vibrant multicultural society going on that generally integrates and works well. In some parts of the country, it's far more ghettoised and can breed resentment, and there's less, economic opportunities. But Sunderland, the first of the big swings to leave, the one that dropped the pound by 6%, they all seem to anecdotally blame immigration while they were voting for leave, but they have a relatively low immigration level, certainly compared to the rest of the country. So there are lots of theories. I don't think there's real answers. They might come. It's not yet. Some people have asked, is the referendum binding? No, there's no legislation in Britain that referendums called by the government must see those results enacted. Britain generally has like an unwritten constitution, but it will be enacted, or the Conservative Party will never be believed over anything they ever say ever again. Surprisingly, some people still give them the benefit of the doubt. I mean, they have lied over many other promises before, but this would be the biggest lie, the most obvious lie. Stripped naked, painted luminous orange, and I don't know, popped on a podium dancing to Mika. It's going to happen. So what does happen? Both Northern Ireland and Scotland now have politicians pushing for a referendum of their own to leave the United Kingdom and rejoin the European Union. Scotland on its own, Northern Ireland reunited with the rest of Ireland. And despite the bravado, there's no guarantee that either would do so. Scotland recently voted against the United Kingdom. Scotland recently voted against leaving the United Kingdom, and the crashing value of oil since then has only harmed their chances. Northern Ireland still remains pro-unionist overall, and I'm not sure the European Union will be enough to make people switch those allegiances. But as the events of last night shows, anything can happen. Now, firstly, the divorce isn't going to happen overnight, no matter how the markets react. It's going to take time for any country to extract itself. A lot of laws have to be untangled, rewritten, torn up, started over from scratch. We're in this for the long haul. I mean, now would be a really great time to start a career in the civil service. If that's what you want. What about the economy? Stupid, I think. That's how Clinton used to say. Some companies are going to leave Britain. There's going to be job losses. Factories will close. Thousands will be made unemployed. I mean, to some degree, it's going to be Armageddon. Slowly, these will be replaced by others. Right now, with the crashing currency and shares, it's a pretty good time to invest in the UK. And there are signs that's already happening. And that's the kind of thing that will cushion, if not make up for the drop. But there are likely to be long-term effects. Without easy access to a revolving, cheaper Eastern European task force workforce, manual low-skilled wages are likely to rise, but not by much. And the pound will be worth less anyway, so despite the racists voting for Brexit, Britain will still have a large immigration population and will continue to recruit. So probably much to racist chagrin will be likely to have immigrants from the Caribbean, from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, as we will Europe. And none of the political classes seem to be that keen in sending any current immigrants home. So that won't happen either. Basically, the big change is that some of those who voted for leave, and some of those who voted for Remain are expecting to happen aren't going to. So I guess that's the message. Keep calm and carry on. It'll all seem better after a nice cup of tea. As long as we can, negotiate favourable terms for tea importation. Maybe outsource such arrangements. The East India Tea Company, that's got a reassuring sound to it. And yeah, I know this is for Bleeding Cool, and I haven't mentioned comics yet. Now is a great time for Americans to spend money on Amazon.co.uk. I talked to Diamond Comics Distributors UK earlier, and they told me that there's no plans yet to change the price of items imported in from America. But they're keeping an eye on things, and will let stores know the moment that will change, if it does. Probably will. So I reckon that Brits are probably going to have to spend more on their American comics, while British creators working for American publishers will see a pay rise. But the price of wine will probably rise more than that to wipe any benefit out there. As for travel, well, we're all of us masters at travelling to the USA for comic conventions now. We all have our ESTAs renewed every 2 years, and pay for the privilege. And it looks like we may have to arrange something similar for Europe. I think the biggest difference we're all going to notice is that now we won't be able to blame things on the European Union anymore. Now, will we cope over that? I'm not so sure. The best advice I can give is keep calm and carry on drinking tea. It's all getting in tears.